The whispered legend. Across the infinite void, where civilizations were born and consumed by the relentless march of time, there existed a story that no historian could validate, yet no one dared to dismiss. It was whispered in the dark corners of trade stations, murmured in cautious tones by alien diplomats, and feared by those who claimed to have seen a glimpse of its truth. The tale spoke of a being beyond time, an immortal entity, a woman of unfathomable beauty and power. She was known by no name, claimed by no race, and yet her presence was undeniable. Some called her a goddess, a deity lost to the remnants of an ancient empire. Others believed her to be a curse, a celestial omen that haunted those who gazed upon her. But the most terrifying part of the legend was not what was known about her. It was what was left unspoken. For the greatest secret of all, the one fact that sent chills through even the bravest warriors, was that no one had ever seen her face and lived to tell the tale. The name of her species had long been forgotten by the lesser races, but to the old ones, the beings who had seen the birth of the cosmos, she was known as the last of the Vaelari, a race so advanced that their knowledge surpassed the understanding of any known empire. They did not conquer through war or diplomacy. They simply existed, their presence alone shaping the course of civilizations. But then they vanished, as if the stars themselves had swallowed them whole. All that remained was her. She did not claim to be their queen, nor did she rule from any throne. Yet across the scattered worlds, her legend grew into something larger than life. Ships that wandered too close to the forbidden sectors claimed to have seen her standing on the edge of space, gazing into the abyss as though listening to voices only she could hear. Some said she could move between realities, slipping through time as if it were nothing more than an old tapestry. She could unravel and weave back together at will. But the most disturbing detail of all was the effect she had on those who encountered her. There were reports, horrifying accounts, of explorers who had unknowingly set foot in the places she was said to walk. They returned as empty husks of their former selves, their minds shattered, their bodies trembling as if something had hollowed them from the inside out. They did not speak of what they saw. They could not. They simply withered away, their eyes fixed on a terror too great for words. That was when the warnings began. Never look upon her face. To do so was to invite madness, to witness something beyond mortal comprehension. No species, no matter how intelligent or resilient, could withstand the sheer magnitude of her existence. The human mind, the alien psyche, none could process what lay beneath the veil of her presence. And so, the galaxy feared her. Even the most war-hardened empires, the most ruthless conquerors, refused to seek her out. Some even doubted that she was real at all, believing her to be nothing more than a cautionary tale, a myth crafted by old civilizations to warn against the dangers of seeking knowledge that was not meant to be understood. But myths had a way of creeping into reality. And for humanity, that moment was about to arrive. The call from the void. For centuries, the legend of the immortal woman had remained nothing more than a ghost story whispered between starfaring traders. That changed the moment a signal. A message unlike any other was intercepted by a deep space monitoring station orbiting Titan. It was a transmission that no human language could decode, a series of strange symbols and rhythmic pulses that seemed more like an ancient song than a communication. At first, the scientists dismissed it as stellar interference, another anomaly among the countless mysteries of the universe. But then, a single word appeared. Come. It was not in any alien tongue. It was in English. The Council of Earth, the ruling body responsible for diplomatic relations with interstellar civilizations, erupted into chaos. No known species in the galaxy had ever transmitted a message directly to humanity in their native tongue without prior contact. No one. And what was even more alarming was that the message contained coordinates, ones that led directly to a sector long thought to be off-limits, a place where ships went dark, a place no one returned from. It was the dead space where the legend of the immortal woman was strongest. Fears spread through the ranks of politicians, scientists, and military strategists. Was it a trap? A new species testing humanity's ability to decipher alien language? Or was it something else? Something ancient that had chosen now, of all times, to reach out. No human had ever seen her. No human had ever been summoned. Until now. The chosen one. In the midst of the council's endless debates, one name surfaced from the depths of academia. Not a soldier, not a diplomat, but a historian. Adam Kesler. By all accounts, Adam was an ordinary man. A scholar, a writer, someone who had spent his life studying the lost languages of extinct civilizations. He was no warrior, no explorer, just a man who had an insatiable curiosity for the past. But buried in his published works were countless papers on the Vaelari, the mysterious species that had vanished without a trace. He had theory upon theory, speculating on their disappearance, their customs, their ability to manipulate time in ways beyond human comprehension. And it was his research, his relentless pursuit of understanding the unknown, that made him the only logical candidate. The council's decision was swift. Adam was given no choice. Within days, he was ushered onto the Starship Horizon, a diplomatic vessel outfitted for first contact scenarios. Its mission, to take him directly to the coordinates given in the transmission. As the ship roared into the vastness of space, Adam sat alone in his quarters, staring at the message once more. Come. He knew the legends. He knew the warnings. And yet, he could not ignore the gnawing truth in his heart. Something had chosen him, and whether it was fate, madness, or something beyond his comprehension, Adam Kesler was about to become the first human in history to stand before the immortal woman and look upon the face that no being had ever survived seeing. As the ship sped through the void, he whispered the words that had haunted the galaxy for generations. Never look upon her face. And yet he knew deep down, he would. The journey into the unknown. The vastness of space stretched before the starship horizon, a silver spear cutting through the void. It moved with silent purpose, the hum of its engines barely noticeable against the overwhelming silence of deep space. Inside, Adam Kesler sat alone in his quarters, his mind turning over the events that had led him here. The message had been simple. A single word. Come. But the weight of that word carried an unimaginable significance. He had spent his entire career studying lost civilizations, decoding languages that had been buried beneath the dust of forgotten time. And now he was being summoned, not by a government, not by an advanced alien race seeking diplomatic relations, but by a legend. The immortal woman, the one no one dared to look upon. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the historical records on his datapad. Every known mention of her had been brief, nothing but whispers and fragmented myths. There were no images, no first-hand accounts that survived, only the lingering fear of those who had dared to venture into her domain and returned as mere shadows of their former selves. And now, Adam was going where no human had ever gone. A warning from the void. A soft chime echoed through his quarters, breaking the silence. The ship's AI activated, and the calm voice of Captain Elias Ward filled the room. Kesler, we need you on the bridge. Adam exhaled sharply. This was it. He set his datapad down and left the solitude of his cabin, making his way through the corridors of the ship. As he stepped onto the bridge, he was met with a sight that sent chills down his spine. The horizon had entered the outer reaches of the Forbidden Sector, the region of space where the immortal woman's legend had been strongest. But instead of the expected nothingness, they were met with an anomaly unlike anything recorded in human history. A massive structure, floating silently in the abyss. It was not a planet, nor was it a station built by any known civilization. It was a city suspended in space, untouched by time. Towering spires of dark crystalline material rose from its surface, curving and twisting like frozen tendrils reaching toward the stars. An entire civilization, perfectly preserved. And at the center of it all, a beacon of light, pulsating with a slow rhythmic glow. "That's where the signal is coming from," Captain Ward said, his voice heavy with unease. "It's waiting for us." Adam stepped closer to the viewing screen, his breath shallow. This was Vaelari architecture, the lost civilization he had spent years studying, the ones who had vanished without a trace. Except they hadn't vanished. They had left something behind. The descent. "We're moving in," the captain announced, his decision final. The horizon adjusted its trajectory, descending toward the floating city, its engines barely making a sound in the oppressive silence. As they drew closer, Adam's heart pounded against his ribs. The architecture was otherworldly, but there was something else, something unnatural about how intact it was. No debris, no damage, no signs of decay. It was as if time had stopped here. And yet, the beacon pulsed in perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat in the void. The ship touched down in an open plaza, a vast stretch of smooth black stone leading to an enormous set of doors. They were engraved with symbols, ones Adam had seen before. He pulled up his datapad, scanning the inscriptions. It took mere seconds before his throat went dry. "No one enters but the one who sees." A shiver ran down his spine. "The door will only open for me," he whispered. "The walk into eternity." Armed soldiers prepared to follow. But as Adam approached the doors, the beacon's pulse changed. The rhythmic glow slowed, deepened, acknowledging his presence. Then, with an eerie groan, the doors opened on their own. Beyond them lay a hallway bathed in a soft, impossible light. There was no apparent source, and yet the air shimmered with a glow that felt both ancient and alive. "I don't like this," one of the soldiers muttered. "You don't have to," the captain replied. "Kesler, you're up." Adam hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. As he crossed the threshold, a strange sensation gripped him. The air felt thicker, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around him. The moment his foot touched the ground inside, the doors slammed shut behind him. The soldiers shouted, pounding on the surface, but Adam could no longer hear them. He was alone. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, the light warping and shifting with every step he took. It was not normal light. It carried memories, visions of things he couldn't understand. He saw entire civilizations rise and fall in the blink of an eye. He heard whispers, words in a language older than time itself. And then he saw her. At the end of the corridor, standing within a chamber of infinite reflections, she waited. The moment of truth. She was cloaked in light, her form only partially visible, as though the universe itself was trying to shield his mind from understanding her. Adam's knees nearly buckled as he stepped forward. The energy in the room was suffocating, as if gravity itself was bending around her. She turned slightly, but did not yet reveal her face. "You came," she said. Her voice was not just sound. It was something deeper, a resonance that sent vibrations through his bones. It was beautiful, yet haunting, like the song of a forgotten world. I received your message," Adam said, forcing the words out. She tilted her head, as if amused by the simplicity of his response. "I have been waiting," she whispered, "for someone who could see." "See what?" Adam asked. Her gaze seemed to pierce through time itself, locking onto his very soul. "The truth." Adam swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to run. But he couldn't. He had come too far. And then, slowly, too slowly, she began to turn. The universe held its breath. Adam's heart pounded against his ribs, terror and curiosity warring within him. He had always been warned, never look upon her face. And yet, as she turned to reveal herself, he could not look away. The face that no one lived to see. The chamber was unlike anything Adam had ever seen. It defied logic, stretching infinitely while remaining confined within walls that flickered like shifting mirages. Time felt wrong here, like it was slipping through his fingers, warping around the presence of the being standing before him. The immortal woman, the last of the Vaelari, began to turn. Adam's breath hitched. His mind screamed at him to look away, to avert his gaze before it was too late. The legends, the warnings, they had all been clear. No one who had ever looked upon her face had survived with their sanity intact. And yet, he could not move. A force stronger than fear held him in place. It was not physical, nor was it something he could explain. It was like the very fabric of the universe demanded that he see. And so he did. The face that could not be described. She turned fully, revealing herself to him. And in that instant, reality itself trembled. Adam gasped, staggering back as an avalanche of visions surged into his mind. It was too much. Too much. He saw the birth of stars and their deaths in the same breath. He witnessed the rise and fall of empires that had existed long before Earth had even formed. Entire species, entire realities, flashing before him in an endless loop of creation and destruction. And her face was all of it at once. It was beyond beauty, beyond horror. It was infinite. One moment, she was a woman of perfect symmetry, her features so breathtaking they seemed to have been crafted by the gods themselves. In the next instant, she was nothing but shifting light, a silhouette carved from the glow of dying galaxies. Then she was something else entirely, a beam of shadows, flickering between existence and non-existence, her form made of whispers that echoed across eternity. Adam could not process it. His mind was not meant to comprehend what he was seeing. He felt himself falling, not physically, but mentally, as if his consciousness had been ripped from his body and sent spiraling into the vast nothingness between dimensions. But just as he was about to be consumed, a voice, her voice, pulled him back. The last of the Vaelari. "You see it now," she said, and her voice was no longer just a sound. It was a feeling, a wave of sorrow and understanding that wrapped around him like a soft current. Adam gasped for air, clutching his head as the vision slowed, the overwhelming cascade of knowledge retreating just enough for him to remain sane. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. "I don't. How am I still alive?" She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Because you were meant to see." Adam tried to steady his breathing, but the weight of what he had just experienced threatened to crush him. "I don't understand. What are you?" She stepped closer, and though she no longer shifted between forms, he could still feel the echoes of her presence bleeding through reality itself. "I am the last," she said softly. "The last of a people who walked through time as easily as you walk through a room. The last of a race that saw the universe for what it truly was, and what it was meant to be." "The Vaelari," Adam whispered. She nodded. "We were not meant to fade. We were not meant to disappear. But time is an enemy to all things, even those who once thought themselves above it." Adam's mind raced. The Vaelari had been a mystery, a species so advanced they had become myth. No one knew where they had gone. No one had ever found remains, artifacts, or ruins. It was as if they had been erased. "What happened?" he asked. "Where did they go?" She looked past him, as if gazing into the endless reaches of space beyond the chamber walls. They sought to go beyond existence itself, to step outside the boundaries of reality, and become something more. Adam's throat went dry. And they succeeded. Her gaze darkened. No. The air in the room grew heavy, as though the weight of an entire civilization's failures and regrets pressed down upon them. "They reached too far," she continued. "They pushed beyond the limits of what even they could comprehend. And in doing so, they became something else." Adam shuddered. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes, her expression momentarily pained. "They did not die. Not in the way you understand death. They are still here, in a way. But they are trapped, lost in the space between existence and oblivion." Adam felt a chill crawl down his spine. "And you. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with something ancient and mournful. I stayed behind. The last Vaelari. The only one who remembers what we once were. If I leave, if I vanish as they did, then the memory of my people is truly gone. The price of eternity. Silence stretched between them. Adam had spent his life uncovering the lost histories of the universe, but this was something else entirely. A woman who had watched entire civilizations rise and fall, who had lived through the passing of time itself, while everything around her crumbled to dust. Alone, the weight of her existence was unbearable, and yet she carried it. "You sent for me," Adam said finally. "Why?" She hesitated for the briefest moment before answering. "Because I cannot do this alone anymore." Adam felt something tighten in his chest. "You are the first," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The first being to look upon me and survive. The first to see and understand." He swallowed hard. "And what does that mean?" Her expression softened, a tragic, knowing smile. "It means you have a choice." Adam's heart pounded. "To leave this place and forget what you have seen. To return to your people and live your life as if none of this ever happened." She took a step closer. Or to stay. The room seemed to grow smaller, the walls pressing in, reality bending around her words. To stay and become something more. Adam felt the full weight of those words crash over him. Stay. Here. With her. To walk the path of the Vaelari. To bear the burden of knowledge that no one else could ever understand. It was impossible. And yet, something deep inside him whispered that he had been meant for this moment all along. He looked at her, this being of infinite beauty and sorrow, the last of her kind. And he realized he was not afraid. The choice that would change everything. The chamber hummed with an energy Adam couldn't describe. It was neither cold nor warm, neither light nor dark. It simply was, existing outside the constraints of time and space as he knew them. And at the center of it all stood her, the immortal woman, the last of the Vaelari. Her presence was a paradox, both infinitely vast and impossibly contained within the delicate form of a being who had existed longer than entire civilizations. Adam felt like he was standing on the precipice of something far greater than himself, staring into an abyss that whispered secrets beyond human comprehension. And yet, despite the weight of this moment, despite the sheer impossibility of her existence, she looked at him with something deeply human, a gaze filled with understanding, sorrow, and the faintest flicker of hope. "You have a choice, Adam Kesler," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet resonating through every fiber of his being. To leave, or to stay. The temptation of the unknown. Adam's mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what she was offering him. If he left, he would return to Earth as the only living being to have stood in the presence of the immortal woman and survived. He would have knowledge beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. He would be a historian unlike any other, one who had not merely studied the past, but had touched it, spoken with it, learned from it. But if he stayed, he would step beyond the boundaries of everything he had ever known. He would leave behind his home, his people, his very place in human history to walk a path that no one before him had ever dared to tread. "What does staying mean?" Adam asked, his voice steadier than he expected. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering his question. "It means that you will see the universe as I do." Adam's stomach tightened. "You mean, I'll become like you?" She let out a soft, sad laugh. "No, not yet. The Vaelari did not become what we were overnight. It was a journey, a process of unraveling the very fabric of existence. Staying means you will begin that journey." Adam's breath caught in his throat. He had spent his entire life chasing the past, searching for pieces of forgotten civilizations, decoding fragments of history to understand those who came before. But this was a chance to see beyond history itself, the weight of eternity. His fingers twitched at his sides. "And if I leave?" She hesitated. Then you will return to your world with the memories of this place. You will go back to your people and live out your days as you were meant to. He frowned. But what happens to you? The air in the chamber grew heavier. I remain, she said simply, alone. Adam felt something twist inside him. She had been alone for eons, watching, remembering, carrying the weight of an entire civilization's downfall on her shoulders. She had endured the slow decay of time while the rest of the universe moved forward. And now, he was being given a choice, a chance to either leave her in that solitude or to stand beside her in the unknown. The voice of the stars. Adam took a slow, measured breath, staring at the shifting light around him. Every logical part of his mind screamed at him to turn back, to take this knowledge, return to Earth, and continue his life. But logic had never been what drove him. Curiosity did. He had spent his life chasing stories, myths, forgotten truths. And now he stood at the very heart of one, looking into the eyes of a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires older than time itself. Why me? He asked. Why was I the one who could look at you? Her expression softened. Because you are not afraid of the past. The words sent a shiver down his spine. The others who came before you, they sought power, or conquest, or glory. They came with fear in their hearts, terrified of what they might find. And in their fear, they destroyed themselves before they could understand. Adam swallowed hard. And me, she smiled, just barely. You came seeking knowledge. That is the difference. Something in him shifted then. For so long, he had believed that history was something to be studied, documented, analyzed, but never touched, never felt. And yet, here he was, standing in the presence of living history itself. How could he walk away from that? The first step into the beyond. Slowly, deliberately, Adam reached out his hand. The immortal woman blinked, surprise. No one had ever touched her. Not in all the centuries she had spent alone. But Adam didn't hesitate. If you can bear the weight of eternity, he said softly, then so can I. A slow, radiant glow spread through the chamber. The very walls shuddered, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment. The woman closed her fingers around his, and in that instant, Adam Kesler ceased to be human. Not entirely. Not yet. But something inside him changed. The weight of knowledge of time itself began to settle into his bones. The whispers of the past grew louder, wrapping around him, filling the spaces in his mind that had once belonged to simpler thoughts. He could feel the universe now, the pull of history, the threads that connected all things. He was no longer just a historian. He was becoming something more. And for the first time in centuries, the immortal woman was no longer alone.